Hi everybody, this is Dr. Chris Doss. Thanks for joining us for this video today. Before we get started, I just want to share with you a few very exciting upcoming courses on Sabra Global Education. The first one is Jesus' Parables as Jewish Scripture with Dr. R. Stephen Notley, Distinguished Professor of Bible at Alliance University. This course is 4 sessions, 1 hour each, taking place on Mondays from March 27th to April 17th, 2023. The second one is the Passover Seder and the Last Supper, Jewish and Christian Traditions in Dialogue and Competition, taught by Rabbi Dr. Robert Harris of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. This course meets for 1 hour per week on Thursdays, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, March 9th, 16th, 23rd, and 30th. And the third one is the History of the Hebrew Alphabet, which I am teaching. And this course meets for 4 sessions of 45 minutes each on Saturdays, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, February 25th to March 18th. Hope you can join us for these classes, and we would appreciate your spreading the word.
Rashi's introduction to the Song of Songs. And just the fact that he's writing an introduction makes him a man of his time, right? Again, it's a very interesting chapter in the history of reading, which I won't go, but the idea of, I'm going to write an introduction before I actually write the book, we take it as, duh, obvi, right? But for them, it was an innovation. So he begins with a verse from Psalms, right? So he's going to use it, he's going to interpret it, right, for the purpose of his interpretive program. One thing has God spoken, two have we heard. You see where he's going with it already. There's one text, one scriptural verse yields many meanings. And the end of the matter is that no scriptural verse ever escapes the hold of its sense. So observe. The older part of this idea is a basic core presence in every midrash that anybody ever wrote or taught back in the day, which is meant there's Rabbi Lisa, there's Rabbi Mika, there's Rabbi Jessica, there's Rabbi Seth. Each of them have their own interpretation. They are all sermonically or homiletically oriented, religiously suited interpretations, and we link them one to the other with the Hebrew words davar acher, which means literally another matter, but what it functionally means is here's another interpretation, and here's another interpretation. Ad infinitum. The Bible, taken, construed midrashically, is so strong that it can sustain an infinite number of interpretations, however many expositors there are. Rashi adds this other element. These are 5 Hebrew words. Ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto. This is a rule that exists in antiquity. It never got applied in antiquity in rabbinic circles, but it's there. I think it occurs 3 times in the Babylonian Talmud, right? Which, if you think about 3 times the length of Encyclopedia Britannica, it's not such a prevalent teaching. But he has it, and he is one of the many people in the Middle Ages that says, I'm going to pay attention to this idea. So what does it mean to the hold of its sense? It eventually is the concept that you and I would call context. What did the words actually say? And I will tell you, again, if we ever do a different course in the history of Jewish and Christian, Bible reading as a general statement, there's a Christian who comes just after him named Hugh of St. Victor, who's arguing with his literary public. And he goes, fellas, I know it means Christ. I get it. I'm a good Christian. But the prophet must have meant something by these words back then, right? It's 800 years before Jesus. It must have meant something back, right? And that idea that they're struggling to get is the new idea that is going to animate everything we're going to do the rest of today. So if you're looking for the rule, what's your takeaway when, your good friend, Jessica says, oh, what did you do on Tuesday night? You're going to say, we learned about the implications of this old Talmudic rule that nobody had ever really paid much attention to until the 11th century. Ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto. No scriptural verse ever escapes the hold of its sense, meaning it can mean lots of things midrashically and religiously, but it also always retains what we might call its original meaning, intended by its author and received as such by its original audience. I have a friend's dad who used to say, when Jeremiah walked the streets of Jerusalem, what did he mean by those words, and how were those words construed by his immediate audience, right? That is a meaning we can locate in time and space, okay? So that's what Rashi says here. But then he goes on, even though the prophets spoke their words in allegory, and he uses a word, dugma, which you see in Hebrew characters, which is a Greek word. How did he know it? He knew it through the Talmud. But it's what you and I would call figuration or allegory. So pause for a minute. What is an allegory? Let's start with an easier question. What's a metaphor? It's one of my favorite questions. What's a metaphor? But a metaphor is a false comparison, right? My love is a rose, right? I know that my love is really not a rose. My love is a love. But by saying my love is a rose, and I push the idea of loveness up against the idea of roseness, even though they are dissimilar things, I learn one from the other in both directions, potentially. And then, even though it's an immediate falsehood, it contains an ultimate truth. And we all use metaphors all the time. If you take a series of metaphors that are sustained as such over the body of an entire piece of literature, it becomes an allegory. So there is truth about this, that literality and figuration both can contribute to the proper interpretation of a composition. Okay? So I'm not going to tell you, unless you're looking at a Disney cartoon, Animal Farm's not about animals, really. Its essence is about something heinous and evil. But it's also about animals because they're right on the page. And you, the reader, have to figure out the relationship. That's why allegory is both the method to unlock it, and it's also the literature itself. You can look it up. Okay. So, but Rashi then goes on to say the allegory for him, don't forget, is love for God, of God for Israel, and the exodus from Egypt, the giving of the Torah, etc. But one must reconcile the allegory according to its characteristics and its order, just as the words of Scripture are ordered one after another. So this is Rashi's genius when it comes to how does he cite old midrashic interpretations. He takes them, he selects them, he sifts through them, and then, this is key, he orders them one after another. So they create their own, their own story, right? Their own, we would say, rabbinic retelling of the biblical text, right? But it means he has an idea. We would say that the term is narratology. He knows how to narrate a story, except that the story that he narrates is going to have a tense relationship between I think George Orwell again, the actual text of Scripture and the intended meaning, he would say, the divine story meaning, level of meaning. But he does this all over the Bible. He plucks, he takes, he arranges. But you see that series literae, the order of the words, right? Contemporary ideas among the Latin scholars who come either just during or just after Rashi, they begin to say, this is important when you're doing Scripture. What are the order of the words? Why does this sentence come before that sentence? Why does this longer narrative come before that one? What's the interrelationship among two disparate texts, et cetera, so on? These are literary questions that still animate our conversations in university classes in literature. And the terms exist within a generation, both in Hebrew and in Latin, and right down the street from one another. Okay? So now he goes and he says, I have seen for the Song of Songs many midrashim, for some of which the entire book is arranged in one midrash, whereas others are scattered in many books of midrash on individual verses. What he means by this is there's a newfangled midrash in his day that's been recently collected. It's called the Midrash on Song of Songs. I cited from it in our class last week, right? How old was it? When did it come to the fore? Was it originally oral as opposed to written? a long story, but he knows it, and he goes, I'm going to pluck out of those the things that I think will help me account for the language of Scripture, so that I can arrange them line after line, verse after verse, and make a story out of what I'm reading.